Can poetic prompts produce richer LLM responses? This question might seem unusual, but it opens a door to rethinking how we interact with AI. The idea of incorporating poetic elements into prompts relies on the unique way poetry stimulates interpretation. Poetry doesn't hand us meaning directly, it invites us to explore. It asks us to notice connections between imagery, metaphor, and concepts, creating a layered experience. When we embed these poetic elements into prompts, they guide the language model to process input more like we do as humans, by engaging with the abstract, the suggestive, and the emotional. Take metaphor as an example. It's like a bridge between the tangible and the abstract, helping us, and as it turns out, language models, traverse layers of meaning. Structural features like rhythm or parallelism hint at relationships that are implicit rather than explicit. The model, attuned to patterns in its training data, begins to align its responses to these subtle cues. The result? Responses that are richer, more nuanced, and more creative. By layering poetic elements into your prompts, you unlock outputs that resonate with the same depth and complexity through which meaning naturally unfolds in human communication. Let's start with a simple truth. Poetry isn't just art, it's a way of thinking. Think about the last time you read a poem. Maybe it wasn't about something grand like love or death, but instead a tiny everyday moment. A falling leaf, a cup of tea, the sound of rain. What made it stick with you wasn't just what it described, but how it invited you to think about it differently. Poetry is powerful because it doesn't aim for clarity alone. It creates space for connection, emotion, and even ambiguity. Now consider how this contrasts with prose. When we describe something in prose, we often aim to be as clear and literal as possible. The facts, the logic, the analysis. Prose is the map to poetry's landscape. Both are valuable, but poetry invites us to go deeper, to think across boundaries, to feel as well as understand. That's why poetry works so well for AI prompts. It speaks the same language as creativity. It uses tools like metaphor and imagery to unlock hidden meaning. It turns ordinary ideas into extraordinary ones, and it pushes boundaries between the literal and the abstract. For example, let's take a simple prompt prose version. Describe change, poetic version. What does the chrysalis dream as it prepares for flight? The prose version might generate a straightforward explanation. Change is the process of transformation from one state to another, but the poetic version invites the model to engage with layers of possibility. The chrysalis dreams of open skies and sunlight, where what was becomes what could be. Poetry reshapes the question, and by doing so, it reshapes the answer. Another tool poetry brings to the table is imagery. Instead of stating something directly, it paints a picture in the mind. For example, a simple prompt like "describe the ocean" could become, "What secrets does the restless ocean murmur to the moon?" This kind of language encourages the model to go beyond surface-level details and explore relationships, moods, and stories. Finally, poetry's ability to highlight connections and work within ambiguity is key. A straightforward prompt like "What is loneliness?" might generate a functional response. Loneliness is the state of being isolated or disconnected. But a poetic prompt, "How does loneliness echo in the silence of forgotten dreams?" might guide the model toward a richer response. Loneliness echoes like a song heard only by shadows and stars. Poetry's strength lies in its capacity to forge connections and suggest relationships, aligning perfectly with the capabilities of a language model. By framing prompts poetically, we're not just asking better questions. We're inviting more nuanced and insightful answers, and that's where the magic begins. Poetic prompts don't aim to make a language model write poetry. Instead, they use the mechanics of poetry, tools like metaphor, analogy, and parallel structure, to expand how the model connects and interprets ideas. These are precise techniques, and their effects are straightforward to describe. Take metaphor, for example. A metaphor connects two ideas, letting one illuminate the other. It creates a bridge between the tangible and the abstract, guiding the model to explore relationships rather than isolated facts. If you ask a model, "What is memory?" you might get a factual response. Memory is the process of retaining information over time. But if you reframe it as, "How does memory store the colors of a fading sunset?" the model begins to synthesize layers of meaning. It considers memory as vivid and transient, linking it to patterns it knows about sunsets, light, and impermanence. The metaphor activates concepts tied to both terms, encouraging the model to combine them in unexpected ways. Analogies work similarly but focus on structural comparisons between concepts. When you ask, "What is the role of leadership?" the answer might stick to generalities. Leadership is guiding others toward a goal. But if you ask, "How is leadership like a lighthouse in a storm?" the analogy pushes the model to think in terms of guidance, constancy, and visibility. It transfers understanding from one domain to another, enriching the response by revealing how these qualities apply in both contexts. Analogies guide the model to emphasize shared features and transferable insights, prompting deeper reasoning. Parallel structure is another effective tool. By organizing prompts with symmetry and repetition, you suggest implicit relationships between the elements. For example, instead of asking broadly, "What are the effects of change?" you might ask, "What does change bring to the roots? What does it take from the branches?" This symmetry encourages the model to consider contrasts and interdependencies. It suggests that change is both a giver and a taker, a force of renewal and loss. Parallel structure helps the model align its response with relational patterns, producing outputs that are more cohesive and deliberate. Now imagine combining these techniques. Let's say you want the model to explore innovation. A straightforward prompt might be, "Explain innovation," which could yield a clear but limited answer. But a poetic prompt might ask, "How is innovation a seed cast into unknown soil? What storms nourish its growth? What light draws it toward the sky?" Here, metaphor connects innovation to growth. Analogy compares it to a plant's life cycle, and parallel structure organizes the questions around nourishment and light. Together, these elements invite the model to respond with depth, exploring the interplay of risk, support, and ambition. When we embed poetic techniques into prompts, we're not trying to create art for art's sake. We're using the mechanics of poetry to unlock richer, more connected, and more insightful responses. Responses that mirror how we, as humans, think and create meaning. Poetic prompts are more than a curiosity. They have practical applications across fields where richer, more nuanced responses can make a meaningful impact. By embedding techniques like metaphor, analogy, and parallel structure into prompts, we can transform the way we engage with AI in education, creativity, and problem-solving. In education, for example, poetic prompts can be used to encourage critical and creative thinking. A straightforward question like, "What is gravity?" might produce a simple factual answer. But reframing it as, "How does the Earth hold the moon in its invisible embrace?" transforms the question into an exploration of relationships and dynamics. It pushes the model and the student to think in terms of connection and causation, rather than static definitions. This approach can make abstract or complex concepts more engaging and accessible, fostering curiosity and deeper understanding. In creative fields like storytelling or world building, poetic prompts can unlock new dimensions of imagination. Instead of asking, "Describe a hero," you might say, "What burden does a hero carry when no one is watching?" This kind of framing invites the model to explore the inner life of the character, going beyond surface traits to uncover motivations, fears, and contradictions. For world building, prompts like, "What stories do the rivers whisper to the mountains?" can generate vivid, evocative responses that inspire unique settings and lore. Even in professional problem solving, poetic prompts can help reframe challenges. Imagine you're tackling a question about team dynamics. A standard prompt might be, "What makes a team effective?" While useful, this may yield generic advice. But if you ask, "How does a team function like a symphony, where each instrument plays its part?" the analogy opens up a new way of thinking. It highlights harmony, balance, and the importance of individual contributions to a shared goal. The potential applications are vast because poetic prompts do something fundamental. They reshape how we ask questions. By focusing on relationships, layers of meaning, and dynamic structures, they open up possibilities for richer, more insightful answers. Whether we're educating, creating, or solving complex problems, these techniques help us engage with AI in a way that mirrors human curiosity, one that thrives on connection, exploration, and discovery. When we embed poetic techniques into prompts, we aren't just enhancing the creativity of AI responses. We're transforming the very way we interact with machines. Techniques like metaphor, analogy, and parallel structure expand the scope of what's possible in an exchange with a language model. They guide it to think relationally, to explore connections, and to generate responses that mirror the layered, interconnected way humans approach meaning. This isn't about teaching machines to write poetry. It's about teaching them to see as we do. to recognize patterns, draw comparisons, and uncover hidden connections. It's a step toward making AI a partner in creativity, a collaborator in problem-solving, and a tool for deeper understanding in education and beyond. Imagine what this could mean in practice. In the classroom, it could spark curiosity and make abstract ideas more tangible. In storytelling, it could unlock richer narratives and more immersive worlds. In the workplace, it could reframe challenges in ways that lead to innovative solutions. So the next time you craft a prompt, don't settle for plain language. Experiment with metaphor, analogy, and parallelism. Replace simple questions with invitations to explore. Ask not just for an answer, but for insight. Because when we bring poetic thinking to AI, we open the door to responses that are not only more creative, but also more meaningful. The potential here isn't just technical, it's human. It's a way of building a bridge between how we think and how machines can help us think better. And that's a future worth imagining.